your mobile game story? Your intro?
Look, we don't really have a set intro for these off the shelves. There's no rejoice everyone or no why hello everyone.
Is this a visual like what is this classified as literarily?
The story wise the visual novel, like without
Okay.
like even when you're talking game wise, this is how like game reviews would classify this as visual novel storytelling.
Okay. I was curious. I wasn't entirely sure
But
what you would classify this as.
and that's kind of the. Well, I guess with our game off the shelves, we have talked about the gameplay here. Do you want to? And that's usually how we start. Do you want to? What are you thinking about FGO gameplay?
It's fine until it isn't. I think. Okay, I've expressed this before, I think, in regards to specifically gacha games, right? Like mobile and big name gacha games like this that go on for so many years. And I've experienced this growth in games I play from beginning to current day. But there's a certain element of when you start a game like this, right? Like, let me give the example of the One Piece Treasure Cruise game, right? When I started One Piece Treasure Cruise, it was brand new, right? There were like 2 or 3 chapters, like there was the basic summoning system, a couple extra quests, and that was about it, right? Like nothing did any like special stuff. It just everyone like did normal stuff,
Sub
and
50
it was
like units to keep track of, probably.
yeah, and it was very easy to kind of determine like what would be like all the regular stuff was very easy. There were like 3 screens total, right? But now I log into One Piece Treasure Cruise, and granted, the game has grown with me, right? So I've been playing actively while it's been growing, but now there's like 3 or 4 different like sub-screen options because there's the fights against other players, and there's like the special quests, and now it's like much bigger, right? And the thing about starting a game that grows like that so late into its life, because you were on the 10th Annie, right, this year?
In JP and NA, you're still in the equivalent of the 8th.
JP counts, right? We're in the 10th year, right? And I imagine that when FGO was new a decade ago, there were a lot less convoluted systems and shops and extra powers and level ups and all sorts of like menus as there are in the game today, right? Like I've literally experienced it with the Leaves of Evocation being added, right? So it's kind of overwhelming as a new player to start it. Because you're not starting it from like having like cavalry classes and knight classes, right? I've got cavalry, knight, the extra 1, the extra 2, the berserkers, the beasts. Like, there's a lot to keep track of.
When the game launched, it was just cavalry, knight, ruler, and shielder.
Exactly. And now ruler's part of its own whole triangle, right? With moon cancers and avengers, right? So I don't know if I can say that I like the gameplay, because for me, the menus and stuff and like the what's stronger than what and what's weak and strong against what was so complex just starting out that I couldn't even begin to start to comprehend it until I actually sat down and like till I hit a point in the story where I had to try to comprehend it, right? Till I hit a point in the story where those differences started to actually become detrimental to me just throwing Coulter at it as like the strongest berserker I had, and berserker deals extra damage to everything but also takes damage. So there was this it was a lot. I don't know if I can say that the gameplay is probably good for an experienced player, because you know, once you get bored of like older stuff, you get introduced to new things, and the new things are like interesting and stuff.
Can I cut you off there and say, as an experienced player, no, I fucking hate the Bleached Earth quest with all my soul. Storm pods are a bullshit mechanic, and I cannot even bring myself to touch class scores yet because I still haven't leveled my 30 other servants that I'm still working on, and they expect me to use the same exact materials for a fucking skill tree that I would use to raise my servant. Fuck that, no. As an experienced player, no.
See,
there's not any fewer systems that I hate to keep track of.
but see, like, there's the thing, like, everyone in chat and you and everyone's been talking about, like, the implementation of, like, the grand system coming up, right? Like, it's coming up in NA. It's not here yet, but it's coming soon. This summer, next summer. Soon.
2 years. 2 years.
2 years. But it's coming somewhat soon, right? But a lot of you guys have had multiple years to level up your servants to power them up. Like me going into it, I don't have that many servants, right? You know, maybe I don't even have, like, let's say a caster that I would want to make grand caster. So what do? You know, like, do I just leave it? Do I just ignore it? Do I try to, like, pick one in a rush and try to level them? Like, I just think that the game, and it's not, I think, necessarily the fault of the game, but coming into a game this big and this old is hard. It's very hard. Like, if the Avalon Lefay event, right? What was that event called? That I played, like, winter, like, November-ish
not
last
Avalon
year.
Lefay, that was Fairy Night Cup.
Yeah. Like, if Fairy Night event hadn't been there for me and hadn't been as easy as it was with the servants that people were putting up on their list for me to use, I am not sure I could have finished Solomon at this point. Like, let's not forget the fact that is, like, probably 80% of the leveling and like what went into leveling and acquiring servants came from that single event.
Well, there's a reason
in the last 6 months.
Technically, every single mat that you can earn in that event, you can earn by playing main store. You're getting some of what you need from that, and then you can go and grind it in the free quests. So there's a reason why I never pushed you to grind those free quests, and this is a problem with the app itself. The rates on those free quests are so shit, it was never worth bringing up over just telling you to play Fairy Night Cup.
Yeah, so, like, without that event, like, that event basically boosted my gameplay enough that I was able to kind of blaze through up until round table to a certain extent.
I think a lot of players are going to, like, no matter where you start in the game, a lot of players have that same experience where their account's kind of lacking until they go at one event, like their first event, actually hard.
Yeah.
For me, it was the Prisma Codes event, the one you're playing in the D&D campaign right now, actually. But the Prisma Ilia event, that was the first time I ever really played an event, and that's when my account actually started being able to, you know, do shit.
Yeah, but you also started playing a long time ago.
Well, yeah, it's me in a better, like, look.
Yeah.
We compare accounts right now, my account looks like the fucking, I don't know, the United States versus the Democratic Republic of the Congo in terms of military.
Yeah, so, like, I don't love the gameplay, but the thing is, I don't hate it either. There is a certain sense of, like, achievement and accomplishment to, like, putting together a team that does what you mean it to do. Like, I was very excited when you showed me how I could use Jufu and Odysseus to create sort of a functional looping art setup, right? Like, that was very exciting for me. And it's fun to be able to do something like that, right? Like, being able to loop a servant or, like, have just the right thing ready to go to, like, absolutely smash through a fight is really fun.
Learning those combinations, like sticking Coulter with Doman and your coin Sky.
Yeah, like, I never thought of combining those three servants together, but they work wonderfully together, right? Or just like Orion, right? Super Orion, right? In general. So, like, I think that's fun. I enjoy seeing the NPs. I enjoy kind of trying to get to the NPs and then casting them. I don't know if I necessarily enjoy things like the Gwaine fight or, like, the things where you just have to, like, where it almost feels like you're being told you need to have this particular setup that was available at this time in the game that you don't have, or you need to just break the meta to win. I didn't enjoy that, and I feel like it's one of those things where the solution now, because the game is, like, so old and I'm coming in so late, is just, break the meta, grab a Castoria on, like, the team that you have. But that's not, it's not fun to grab a servant specifically to break the meta because the servant is so new that the old meta wasn't really considered when they were created, as it is to create a functional team that will work in the situation.
Like, you came damn close to winning that Gwaine fight just easily with Super Ryan the first time. Mm-hmm. You probably could have if you know how to play Super Ryan at that point.
Yeah.
It's not... I 100% hear what you're saying. Like, it's not a fun gameplay loop if the only reason you're able to even beat it is because it's been power crept out of being a difficult fight.
Yeah, and to like a certain extent, yes, I went through most of part one using Coulter to do just that, like Coulter and Koyan. But at the same time, I mean, Coulter is still a servant that was available at one point in part one, and Koyan doesn't hit like a truck. She just buffs Coulter. And even then, my Koyan didn't buff Coulter all that much for a very long time. So like it didn't feel like I was like breaking the meta. It just felt like I was utilizing something that was given to me that worked. You know what I meant?
But then, like, if you have to imagine how the meta would feel now moving forward with it, you'd be pretty fucked up shit creek without a paddle with what you have now, because you just don't have the tools to make everything work.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a gacha game. And gacha rates and summoning. I mean, we make the joke that, like, no, I'm not going to roll on, like, the story banner because I'm waiting for rate ups. But, like, in no world is this how I ever play gacha games. Like, I play gacha games. This is not how I play gacha games. I typically don't care about waiting for rate ups in specific events. If I want to roll on something, I'll just roll on it. And my normal rationale is if it's a gacha game that I actively play and I'm logging in every day to play quests and do dailies, then I'm going to make back that stuff, right? And if I miss out on something I want, I miss out on something I want. It's a gacha game. I can't literally get everything without bankrupting myself, and I'm not willing to do that, right? Like, I've trained myself out of the mentality that I need to acquire everything and I need to spend money on it if I don't get it. But, you know, there's sort of an ulterior motive to some of the servants I'm saving up for in FGO right now, is that, like, I know that I need Odysseus Rider. Ozymandias Rider, right? I know that Juge Caster will help me, right? Like, the thing is, a lot of the servants I like are also very strong servants and would help me in various ways. And so, rather than just rolling on story, which is what I would normally do if I was playing a gacha game that I play, like, on my own time, I would just roll.
You feel like you need newer pieces or more pieces, like specific pieces.
Specific pieces is how it feels, and that I don't enjoy.
Yeah. I'll bring this up because this is a counter argument I've seen for people that bring up that, like, this feeling of, well, FGO's content is a little bit too, the power scaling gets a little too high, because you haven't really hit that point quite yet. You could still power creep your way out, but the particular counter argument is that pretty much at every point in the game so far, at least, any piece of content can be beaten with the available 1, 2, and 3 stars and the 4-star welfare servants in the shop. And that's kind of fair, but that gets into the other part of FGO, is the excessive amounts of grinding you need to do, which is a gacha game problem in general, but in FGO it feels, at this point in the game, when the units take mats that come from, like, the back end of the game that you can't hope to get to yet.
And I don't grind FGO. This is... while I enjoy certain aspects of FGO, and I'm certainly not hating it, right? Like, I'm not going to stop playing the game now that I finished part 1. Like, this isn't just I'm finally done, thank God, let's get rid of it. I don't think I'm ever going to be a person who opens the game on a day-to-day basis to play, like, back-end quests. That just doesn't feel like something, at least not something I can currently picture myself doing, which means that I miss out on the fact that, yes, if I was willing to dedicate hours and hours and hours to one of my lower rarity servants or something, then yeah, I probably could beat the Gwaine fight with, like, some bullshit I had in my inventory before I pulled, like, good,
well,
like, some other good servants.
Level your Urale, because Urale was the cheat servant to beat that fight for the longest time.
Exactly, right? So, like, it's not the worst. I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of power creep in the game. I just think that the game has become so large and expansive that to a certain extent, everything new is just power crept on the entirety of part 1. And, like, people, you know, it was like sometimes I'd get comments in chat being like, you know, if you just used a Castoria, or, you know, if you just used, like, an Oberon, and I'm like, okay, but Castoria and Oberon came out, like, how many years after part 1?
Years. 5 years for Castoria, about 6 or 7 years for Oberon.
Like, yeah, I could throw something from, like, this year that's super powerful at, like, an early game fight, but I don't want to feel that it's there's like a certain level of like, yeah, if it like I expect power creep in a gacha game, right? But like I don't love it when that's the situation, right? Like that's part of the reason why I was so stubborn about not using Castorias and Oberons. Is like I don't hate Oberon. I just don't want to use Oberon for the sake of just using an easy power creep unit that'll like get you over the hurdle. You know? It's despite my cussing during certain streams about losing out on fights, it is more fun to work with the servants you have and figure out a team rather than just sticking in something power crept and just keeping that thing alive till you hit the end and then letting it bonzo on the boss.
And that makes a lot of sense for the main story, but and I think you felt this at times. It starts to present a problem when you get to the events.
Yeah.
Because in the events, either the event fights were farther and harder in difficulty than your part 1 fights were, which you found when you were trying the Lilum Harlot event, or the grinding is very tedious unless you have one of the more modern solid 3-turn setups.
Which, and let's talk about really briefly, because this is a part of my part 1 experience, right? Let's talk about the 3 events that I actually did participate and grind in, right? So there was Fey Nights, right? Which Fey Nights was very easy for me. And it was because really, you just throw a Melusine at it. Any problem? Throw a Melusine at it. I couldn't do the 90++ quest. I could reliably like slog my way through the 90+, but I didn't need to. I just ran the 90 units until I got the mats I needed, cleared out the shop. Like, it wasn't hard. Throw a Melusine at it, and I like Melusine, so it wasn't really a problem, right? Karna. Karna was my own fault. Nothing in Karna was necessarily hard, per se. Like, I wasn't really struggling with needing help with any of the fights, because I did the whole event on my own in a single day, right? Like, I didn't really struggle, but I was at that game for like 9 hours straight while I was editing video, just sitting at my desk, desperately tapping through because I waited till the last minute, and that was god-awful, right? Partially because those fights had no challenge, right? It was literally just having to sit there tapping. On fights that I knew I could win easily, right? Like, you start the fight and you automatically know you're going to win. But you got to sit there and tap through it, and it was so annoying. And then Lilum Harlot, which was kind of a mix between the two. Whereas I got through probably, 95% of Lilum Harlot on my own. I only needed your help for the last couple fights, in like the last little bit.
It's really just one fight.
Yeah, and I was pretty sensible about how I played Lilum Harlot. I spread out my playtime across like 3 weeks. I played off stream, I played on stream, and it actually was not bad, right? I remember at one point I thought I was going to leave like the last 3 fights to you because I couldn't beat it, and then I gave myself some time to calm down, went back to it like 6 hours later and beat the fight I was stuck on, and then I got stuck on the next one, right? But it wasn't till the very end, right? So Lilum Harlot was decent, right? Like, that wasn't a problem. I feel like Lilum Harlot was my sweet spot for the 3 events that I've actually participated in, because Fey Nights was, I mean, that was through no fault of my own. It was so easy to
damage
beat those.
Bonus CE, damage bonus servant.
Yeah.
Just kind of like...
Yeah, you just bulldoze through, which almost makes it, worse, because...
But those events are built so that you as a player, no matter how your playstyle is, can just hard grind as much or as little as you want.
Yeah. Karna was painful. For a very different reason. Lilum Harlot was a good balance.
There was that other event you played. You played the Ilias Castle event too a bit.
Oh yeah, was that that was with the ninjas, right?
Yeah.
That was god awful. Hated that. That was the worst event I participated in. And it was entirely because of the fucking puzzles in the fights. Hated that.
Trust me, I'm right there with you. I hate those quests too. Like, that is technically part of the same lineage as the Fey Night cut. Like, that's the next version of that event was the Ilias Castle, and it is. I don't like. I think I've seen the community generally doesn't like the gameplay of those puzzles.
Yeah, that was awful. I did not enjoy it. I did not like it. I did not feel like I got anything useful out of it. Yeah, no, unacceptable. I think gameplay-wise, I suppose the thing I appreciate the most out of the entirety of FGO right now is the evocation shop. And I think it's understandable as to why I appreciate that the most, because there's a lot of servants in the evocation shop that are already there and that are coming that I really like and I would have missed out on, right? And not like missed out on a gacha sets, but like missed out in like this servant will never come back around and you can never get them again because they were like a welfare servant, like Santa Carna. And the thing is, I appreciate that, right? Like, especially as a new player going into it who likes a lot of those servants, right? And it's not as if the game isn't giving them to me for free, right? Like, I'm still having to do stuff to get them, right? I'm still having to spend and save currency and grind currency, but it's feasible for me. Because the thing is, I'm experienced enough in Gacha that I'm never going to be upset about something that's just going to come back around and around and around again on rate up that I miss, right? When I'm rolling.
It's when it's a permanent miss.
It's when it's a permanent miss, especially when it's a permanent miss of something that I didn't even get to try for, right?
And that's I gotta give them that. The leaf shop's a really great quality of life feature because some of those servants hadn't been obtainable in 5 years.
Yeah. So I'm very happy about that. I think it's my favorite mechanic so far. Probably followed up by like the Miss Crane's costume shop. I just think it's fun to like be able to get all the little costumes and stuff.
I guess that's the other thing. FGO is one, like a lot of gacha games charge for their costumes. FGO does not,
which I really appreciate. So yeah, I suppose that's kind of as rounded of a gameplay perspective as you're going to get from me. I don't hate it when there are puzzles to figure out, like a Gwaine fight. I do hate it when it's like the ninja event.
Well, I have one last gameplay thing I want to ask you about. What do you think about the gacha rates?
Well. No, there's a story here, right? There's a story here. I actually don't mind them because of PTSD and trauma. Remember how I said I play One Piece Treasure Cruise?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many years it took me to get a Doflamingo? It took me 8 years after he was released, rolling and spending money on every banner that he was right up on in that fucking game. At one point, I didn't even log into the game except for when I got email notifications that he was on Rate Up to roll for him and spend money. So I've actually gotten you know what the other hang on, there's a two-parter to this. One, I've actually gotten quite a lot of decent servants in the gacha pulls, like just accidentally, that I've enjoyed, right? Like I got Koyan, I got Odysseus, I got Iskandar, I got Fion, but the other thing is, because the way I'm experiencing FGO is tied so tightly to Seki Reacts, I'm also sort of, as I play the game, learning more about which servants I like, right? And being introduced to more characters that I like, which means that a lot of the times, something that didn't make a really big splash in my inventory when I pulled it, like 6 months later, we do the video on it, and now I'm like, oh,
like,
I'm so glad I have this character.
Knick-Knack, can you update my inventory so I have my newer characters in there and you get rid of the ones I shouldn't see yet? And I'm like, oh yeah, you have this character. Oh, nice.
Exactly. So it's kind of like a little gift to myself, you know? And I guess because I'm not playing it as like a serial player, I'm also not as focused on the star ratings and like the quality of the servants. I care more about the historical context. And sometimes that means that the characters I want are lower rarity and I'm able to get them more easily, you know?
I also have to wonder if maybe there's another. I think there might be two other aspects to this compared to One Piece Treasure Cruise that might help here a lot. The first one here is FGO NA compared to say FGO JP is a very fun peculiarity that makes it very, very kind to free to play players. You can see every banner that's going to happen 2 years in advance with only a few mix-ups.
Yeah, and save up, which is a really big bonus if there's one person in particular and you're so dedicated to... Jesus fucking Christ, Messenger must be open. I'm not going to try to find which tab it's in right now. But yeah, because if you're so dedicated to wanting to roll a specific character, like me right now with Ozymandias, you know when his next rate up is, and you can just sit on your courts and save them till you have a fairly decent amount. Like, I'm fully expecting that by the end of this year, I will have rolled either Ozzy or Zhuge Liang, right? Like, if I miss out on Ozzy, I save up for Jugay. But honestly, I'm going to be spending a lot of quartz on Ozzy. He comes up first. And I'm probably looking to be able to spend somewhere in the range of like 400 quartz plus tickets. Which is pretty damn good chances on getting him, especially on a rate-up banner. And knowing that he can spook on any normal roll that I do. So it's kind of like...
The other potential difference here is, you did mention before, the way you go about the gacha and FGO is very different from how you've been going about gacha in other gacha games, where you are being a lot more selective in FGO about what you're rolling on. So what that also probably means, you have a lot more currency saved up free to play than you would going into a random Doflamingo banner on One Piece. Now, whether or not you spend money on that, it either means you either A, in Doflamingo's banner, missed them altogether, or B, scenario B, you spent money on them. In scenario C, which is probably the common one, I'm sure, based off how you've talked about, is you spend money on him and you still miss him.
Yeah, so, that would be the one.
Like, these aren't necessarily points to FGO inherently, but FGO and A, and specifically how you differ in your approach to FGO and A, is like, that feels like the difference between this gacha system and how you're used to it.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a big bonus to the fact that I'm kind of being introduced to servants in the sense that I am through the React series. So it's definitely a big sort of yay for my opinion on the gacha rates, because I'm sure some people are sitting here being like, oh my god, the gacha are not friendly, I fucking hate this. And I'm like, honestly, the gacha have been fucking great to me. I pulled Odysseus the week before his video was supposed to come out. You know what I mean? Like, I did him and I was like, oh man, I really wish I could get Odysseus. And then he went on rate up less than a month later and I pulled him.
Now, if I were to actually sit you down in terms of the number rates, you might go...
Honestly, it's probably on par with some of the other gacha games I've played. And the thing is, I've looked at the rates, and, like, I see the percentage numbers. I do, believe me. I see those 0.05 and 0.03% chances. But, my brain just doesn't care. No, it's not that it doesn't care. I just don't rationalize numbers like that very well. So when I see like 0.03%, my thought is, ooh, a 3% chance, not, ooh, a 3%. You know what I mean? Like, I don't necessarily, the numbers to me, like just seeing the numbers doesn't translate to like necessarily a bad thing.
And how about that pity?
I like the idea of the pity system. I think it's great. No other gacha game I've played has that.
Interesting, because pity is becoming a bit of a standard thing in other gacha games, especially when you're looking at like the Hoyoverse stuff like Genshin and Honkai.
Well, the thing is, I don't really play Genshin. I don't play Honkai, right? I haven't actively played Treasure Cruise in a long time, so I don't know if they implemented a pity system. And then, obviously, Infinity Nikki crapped the bed. So I'm currently participating in not playing that game. Love Nikki doesn't have a pity. Well, what do we define as a pity system? Because, like...
Well, there's different types of pity. FGO technically has two pity systems. Just one is not even worth mentioning. Pity systems can be something like, I've played a gacha game where every time you did a full roll, so like it's a full roll is like 5 drops on a character, on like a section of characters, it actually raises the percentage chance you'll get the rate up. And then there's like Genshin, where I think it also does that, where the more you pull on one or on banners, the more likely you are to get a rate up 5-star on the banner. And then you have stuff like FGO's original pity system, which is every time you pull more than 5 copies of a 5-star, you get an item called Unregistered Spirit Origin. If you get 10 of those, you get to pick a servant. Now that's egregious. I've only ever gotten 2 across my entire lifespan of playing both servers, but that is technically a system. And FGO's other pity system, the newer one, is you pull 900 times or the equivalent of 990 servants, or 990 gacha pulls with the free 11th pull every time, and you get the 5-star one time.
Yeah, I think the only experience of something similar to pity I've had is in Love Nikki. And in Love Nikki, for some suits, there is the option that if you do not manage to save up the currency for whatever event is going on, and you don't manage to pull all the pieces, there's often an opportunity a few years later where they'll give you an opportunity to either just outright buy the suit that you missed, right? For like $5, $10, $15, $20, right? Or they'll offer it to you as really high material cost free crafting recipes. So they'll give you the recipe for, because obviously Love Nikki's an outfit game. They'll give you like the entire outfit in recipe form, but then you'll have to have like 300 of like a diamond level material to craft one piece. And so you are going to be sitting there for like 3 months grinding the same diamond level that drops at a rate of like 1 in every 3, and you can only play it free 9 times a day. So there's that. And that's honestly far more painful because either I have to open my wallet, or in the case of some of the suits that I had been working on in Love Nikki, I've also stopped playing Love Nikki because the whole Infinity Nikki thing. But like there was a suit I was working on in there that I've been working on for like 2 years, just free daily, just rolling it, trying to get the pieces I need, and I still haven't finished it. So, but yeah, the FGO pity system seems really nice compared to that.
You're going to be the only player in the world that's ever said that, I hope you know.
Maybe at a certain point I will change my mind, but right now I've been pretty lucky. Let's be honest.
It takes one bad year of only pulling when you hit pity like my brother had last year until you start saying FGO system sucks. I'm just going to say that.
Well, I've had a pretty good year, you know?
Yeah, all things considered.
Yeah, I've gotten some pretty decent servants. And it also helps that a lot of the servants I like are welfare or low rarity.
Yeah. You have the low rarity crop to pick from here.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, we've spent enough time on FGO's gameplay. More time than I think anyone wants to spend on FGO's gameplay, if I'm honest here. The story is... I guess instead of talking about FGO's gameplay here, we talk about the storytelling medium here. What you thinking about visual novels now?
I'm certainly not feeling more positive about it. Look, once again, it is... I find it very hard to communicate and articulate just how much I hate the confines of a visual novel when it comes to reading speed and sort of like, even to a certain extent, like, right, because I noticed this getting real bad around Solomon, the inherent amount of like contextual detail that you are and aren't able to put into a 2 people talking at one another scene on screen, right?
Well, I won't be honest here. That's a complaint about the FGO visual novel system compared to even the other, like Witch on the Holy Night, where Witch on the Holy Night was like a full window of text.
Exactly.
FGO, you're getting 2, and sometimes you get 1 that scrolls past and goes straight to the next one.
I hate that. That's the worst thing ever, is when you're trying to read and it's 2 full lines and it just auto moves on to the third. That's the worst. That's the absolute worst mechanic in that entire fucking reading experience.
And I think you should be starting to see the difference between a high production value visual novel like Witch on the Holy Night in retrospect compared to FGO, 2 sprites on a screen lighting up and unlighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I can obviously see the difference. But yeah, I think that not to be the person to draw a line in the sand here, but I don't think that I will ever accurately be able to explain and demonstrate to a lot of people just how detrimental this form of like storytelling via reading is to the way that I typically read. This is unpleasant. It's lacking in detail. It's lacking in complexity. It's quite frankly juvenile at times in the phrasing and the amount of information that you're able to convey in 2 to 3 lines. When characters have verbal tics, like Ket's going yes at the end of every line, it very quickly goes from being a little verbal tick like in Prince of Tennis, Ryoma saying "mada mada dane" at the end of like the occasional line, to me wanting to reach over and rip Ketz's vocal cords out of her neck so I never have to see that on screen ever again. Because, you know, as much as I enjoy reading for Ketz because I love Ketz, it's too much, right? There's a difference between a verbal tick and ending every single line of dialogue that a character has ever said with yes.
How sad. I knew that one. I remember that one getting you.
Yeah. How sad. And it's the sheer level of like simplification that has to occur to go between a story to FGO screen text, right? Because I can imagine that if this was written out as like a detailed novel, not written in like the equivalent of like what, second person? We're experiencing this in like what, first or second person?
Well, it's first person.
Yeah, it's first person, right? I can imagine if this was written as a novel, right? Like just as not a light novel, not a web novel, not a webtoon, not a manga, but just as a novel with all the detail and contextual elements that comes inherent to a novel, this would not be nearly as excruciating. Like, not nearly as bad. And to some extent, I understand that, like, the visuals do make up for some of that lack of ability to convey detail and context in text. But I think FGO fails at maintaining enough visual input to account for everything they're missing in the written dialogue at times. I think it's not a problem all the time, but I think sometimes they just fail to actually account for the sheer amount of visual input you need to counteract everything you're missing from the dialogue. Like, remember that section of dialogue before Solomon where, like, I couldn't even tell who was talking, right? So that, like, they failed to even provide enough visual clues for me to easily piece together who is talking in what perspective and to which other people.
I'll be curious to see how your thoughts evolve on that. Because FGO, I'll say this, there are times in FGO where later on, where I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, they got a fucking budget. Mm-hmm. And I feel like some of these issues, as far as like the detail and the visualization actually goes, mm-hmm. do start to get, like, they start framing scenes, like, some of the more notable scenes start being framed a lot more like how comic books would, where the character cut-ins are like triangles at the top of the screen, if that makes sense.
Well, and
where it's a little bit more dynamic.
To a certain extent, even in part one, the individual chapters vary greatly in how I think the quality of the story is conveyed. Like, I personally think that the story in London is conveyed particularly poorly, right? I think London was one of the least enjoyable chapters to read, right? Whereas I think that actually Okeanos had a much better communicated story and emotional payout at the end, you know? So it's like, I do have different opinions on the different chapters. I think some were, in my opinion at least, much better to read, better written, and better portrayed on screen for me. So like Okeanos for me is a standout. I really liked playing through Okeanos. I feel like they did exceptionally well with the different characters, and especially Drake's speech at the end, and then calling back to that multiple times with Mash throughout the rest of the series, and the things that Drake said to Mash. Loved that. I thought Okeanos was probably the best that we got, maybe until Solomon, in my opinion.
I would strongly disagree, but I'll let you have your opinion.
I really liked Septum. I read through Septum. I liked it.
I'm gonna chalk that one up to you didn't read Fuyuki or Orleans in that format, so the format hadn't lost any novelty on you yet. Because that chapter had no storyline structure at all. It was just fight to fight to fight. And you took a random excursion to an island to go see servants had no input in the plot whatsoever at all later. I just think...
But the character payout in Septum was nice.
What payout? With who?
The emotional payout. It was nice.
Which character had an emotional payout?
I hate to say it, but Nero.
She did?
Yeah.
Emotional payout? Like, what emotion was being paid out?
I liked Nero in Septum.
I genuinely think if you had read Orleans and Fuyuki in the original format,
but
your opinion
didn't.
would not be the same.
But I didn't, and you can't keep harping on that.
I can't keep harping on Nero, though. They gave her zero fucking development or emotional input into that story?
To a certain extent, I think Babylonia was obviously really good for me. But also, I feel like it's unfair for me to judge Babylonia against some of the other chapters because I had the Babylonia anime I got to watch. So, to me, it doesn't feel fair to put Babylonia up against the other chapters that I'm judging solely on having played them in the game, right? So, like, I really liked Babylonia, right? Like, I really liked the anime, but I wouldn't put it up against Okeanos or Camelot or anything because I had the anime. I haven't seen the Camelot movie yet. We haven't got around to watching it yet. So, Camelot as a story, I liked Camelot as well. I think the two chapters that really, I felt like really bogged me down in terms of reading were probably North America and London. Were the two that I really started to kind of dislike and dread when I got about like halfway through them.
I noticed that as you were reading. I could tell as a viewer that those chapters in particular was where the tedium started to set in. That's not to harp on it too much, but you know where those chapters sat in? Around where Septum would have sat at if you had read from the beginning. So that's where I'm like, I think it is just FGO Part 1. There's a formula that happens from Orleans through E Pluribus Unum. And Okeanos, I'll admit, is much better written than like every other chapter surrounding it. Mm-hmm. But I genuinely think that, like, Okeanos aside, the tedium starts to set in once you've read 2 or 3 chapters of that same sort of format.
But I didn't like the storylines of London or North America at a certain point. Like, London, I feel like in London, it just didn't... Like, most of London just felt like a cop-out to just keep introducing new servants just continuously. You know what I mean? Especially the ending. The ending of London was absolute bullshit.
Well, I agree, actually.
Like, there was no real reason to need to do that, other than just wanting to throw people in.
And I also think Okeanos, because I think Okeanos, in these early FGO chapters, Okeanos is like the sole exception to this. Every single chapter has that one servant where you're like, wait, they were in that chapter? Okeanos technically has Blood Axe, but who? But like Orleans, and I know you didn't read Orleans, has Atalanta. Mm-hmm. No one remembers Atalanta was in Orleans because she's also in Okeanos, and she's an actual character in Okeanos. Septum had. Did you remember that Zhuge Liang was in Septum?
Yeah, I did.
What was
look. So there's another dimension here, right? Remember how I said it doesn't feel fair to count Babylonia, right? Mm-hmm. Because I saw the anime, right? You have to keep in mind that I was essentially, up to a certain point, we were playing through the D&D game at the same time as I was playing through a lot of these chapters, right? Or not at the same time, but like, we also played through these chapters in the D&D game, right? So like, you know... arguably, I've experienced Orleans several times. Like, I read the manga, I played the D&D game with you. Like, I've experienced Orleans, I've experienced Fuyuki, I saw the movie, I've, read the manga, played the D&D game. And like, granted, like, I think Orleans is an interesting one because I feel like Orleans is maybe the chapter where I remember the least amount of servants from it. Is that, like, sometimes you'll just say, oh, that character was in Orleans, and I'm like, really? But that's because I feel like Orleans had a very large cast of irrelevant characters.
So did Septum. So did London. So did
Merlin
was in E Pluribus Unum.
Yeah, well, I didn't say that I loved E Pluribus Unum, did I? E Pluribus Unum I wasn't a huge fan of because it did just at a certain point feel like the entire chapter was just one fetch quest. You know? Like, there's doing fetch quests, right? And then there's an entire chapter that's just a fetch quest. And that's what E Pluribus Unum felt like. And to be honest, it didn't feel particularly well written as a fetch quest. I think E Pluribus Unum probably did the worst out of all of the chapters we read in handling in handling servants acting independently and then dying. Because I feel like we met a bunch of servants in E Pluribus Unum, and then by the time you hit the climax, 2/3 of them were dead. And you didn't get to see them die. They just died. I mean, you got to see like 2 or 3 screens of their dialogue around when they died, but they just died off and never came back. But yeah, I think North America is a particular standout in how badly they handled servants coming in and out, acting independently, and splitting up. Yeah. Putting aside Babylonia, like the movie, Babylonia, I feel like, had the most diverse writing in terms of like what you did inside the chapter of all the chapters, is because you did have like the jokes about the menial fetch quests, and then you did have like the prove yourself to me and do these other things. Like, I feel like Babylonia was probably the most varied, which definitely like made it more interesting and more amusing. I was definitely still hanging in there for Babylonia, regardless of how long it took, and it did take a lot of streams to get through Babylonia. The other thing is that the chapters keep increasing in length, up to Solomon, which was much shorter, but it's like, that's not sustainable. There's no way that the chapters keep increasing in length like that all the way down. I think I just got an answer I don't like.
They get shorter again for the Epic of Remnants.
I'm in Epic of Remnant.
Yeah, congratulations. You have a nice selection of shorter chapters.
They can't keep getting longer after that.
The Lost Belts? The main Lost Belts, at least, yeah, they do.
Well, okay, no. I feel like the Lost Belts are like the equivalent of Part 1.
In terms of length? There's a reason I stopped streaming the Lost Belts all at once, and why my current streams take me all night to stream when I do one full FGO chapter without story and only gameplay.
I think the perception I've always had of the Lost Belts, the way people talk about them, is that like each Lost Belt is kind of the equivalent of like the entirety of Part 1. Not in length, but like just in like story cohesiveness. And then you move on to the next one.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm a little lost what you mean. I just...
Okay.
Not disagree. I just need you to clarify that.
The perception I've had is that I would not liken the Lost Belts to Okeanos. I would liken Lost Belt 1 to Part 1 up to Babylonia, right? Where so like Lost Belt 1 is not the equivalent of like Okeanos inside of Part 1. It's the equivalent of Part 1. And then the next Lost Belt would be Part 2, and the next Lost Belt would be Part 3.
No, definitely not in terms of length. Like, this is not you playing Lost Belt 1 as all
no, not in terms of length, in terms of story cohesiveness. I mean, like, each Lost Belt is sort of like the story cohesive equivalent of like, because all of Part 1 was one long story, right?
Yeah.
It had a beginning and it had an end goal, and you were just playing through the different like sub chapters basically of that, right? Like the quests needed to reach the end, right? The Lost Belt is the whole the one Lost Belt is the one story, and all the stuff inside Lost Belt 1 is the different like singularities.
I see what you're saying, and to an extent I can...
That's how it sounds to me when people describe it. So for me, I rationalize FGO Part 1, Epic of Remnant, the 3 Lost Belts?
7
Lost Belts.
Yeah.
And then the Ordeal Calls.
And then there's some like mini mid-chapters between some of those Lost Belts.
Yeah.
But
and then the Ordeal Calls.
The Lost Belts are definitely, more than most of the FGO Part 1 chapters, much more standalone stories. Mm-hmm. But sort of alternative to that, the Lost Belts also have a much more cohesive main narrative between them, like that carry over between Lost Belts. Whereas you notice in FGO Part 1, even though the narratives it's technically one long narrative.
No, low-key.
The actual narrative between the chapters, like, let's be honest here, until the Solomon chapter, was Solomon really at the top of your mind while reading through most of these stories?
No.
Whereas in the Lost Belts, the overarching plot is...
Lynor was, because we kept seeing him.
Yeah, in the early parts a little
bit.
But the Lost Belts are a lot more of a... They keep that overarching narrative a lot more in the forefront across all of the Lost Belts.
Well, I suppose I'll see when I get to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think on the whole, I feel like obviously it peaked much higher in the second half than it did in the first half, right? Like like you had Okeanos, and then like arguably you had Okeanos, and then you had Camelot, and then you had Babylonia, and then you had Solomon, and those four are definitely the best chapters within it, right? Like hands down. There's what, 8 chapters if you count Solomon?
9 with Fuyuki.
9 with Fuyuki. Okay, so 9 chapters if you count Solomon and Fuyuki. Definitely those 4 are the top of it. You know, like that. Yeah.
The way I've started likening FGO Part 1, and I think I brought this up during the stream itself as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying in terms of quality. Definitely not in terms of quality. But in terms of, like, the appeal of it, it's very similar to a shonen anime or to One Piece, where it's like, there are some really weak-ass arcs, but then there are some really strong arcs individually, but the real appeal of it is sort of the collection of it as a whole, if that makes sense. Like, a lot of the bigger moments wouldn't work if it didn't have the... Like, obviously, we wish that build-up was more consistently strong.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
the moments as a whole would work better, work more as a cohesive whole.
To a point, yes and no in FGO, I see that. Because, yes, with Solomon, I get it. You wouldn't have half the payoff of, Solomon if you didn't have all those servants calling back and talking to you. But also, at the same time, I mean... There's not a lot of important carryover outside of that in between chapters. You know what I mean? There's some, Da Vinci narratives carrying over. And, I feel like the stuff that carries over, right, is shit like the Sherlock Holmes thing. Or, what Drake said to MASH, you know? There are moments where you can definitely identify, this is a carryover point that we're going to return to several times. But I feel like until you hit Solomon, the vast majority of it is pretty unconnected, in my opinion. Outside of, obviously, you being the framing narrative of you and MASH going to all of these different places.
Well, I know it's been a while. I can kind of step back, and I didn't catch all this in my first read-through, so I get why it feels that way. But if we go all the way back to the beginning, Fuyuki's obviously the setup. We're gonna Fuyuki aside, that's always gonna be connected to the overarching plot.
Yeah.
Orleans, I can definitely agree, feels very, very disconnected. But that also introduces Jean as her big final moment later.
But once again, if you discount Solomon.
Yeah.
Right? Because Jean's comeback big moment is in Solomon.
But then Septim is where Lev actually bows out of the main story until Solomon. Okeanos is where you find out Solomon is a character at all in this story because you meet David.
But at the same time, keep in mind, I already knew Solomon was a character. This is not a revelation to me experiencing it.
But that's because I told you in Seki Reacts.
I know, but the point stands that in my experience of it, that was not some sort of revelation to me. You know what I'm saying? In a purely opinion perspective, I don't pick that out of the story as something specific because I just knew it was already there. You know? Whereas maybe a first-time player who didn't have the perspective would have picked that out. Or would have been able to on a second playthrough or something. And the thing with Lev, I feel like Lev was there in every chapter, even though I didn't see him in every chapter.
He wasn't.
It's just because he's a very memorable character, okay? You know? He's just very memorable. Squirrely little sharp teeth rat man. Very memorable.
London actually had you confront Solomon for the first time.
Fucking London.
I know London's climax is not the thing you want to remember, but Solomon was probably the biggest part of that climax.
Yeah.
I'm not going to defend E Pluribus Unum. I'm really not.
What was even happening in E Pluribus Unum?
Merlin showed up, I think.
Briefly.
Camelot's kind of very disconnected, but also it's...
But Camelot had... I will say, Camelot was the first of the singularities, I feel, to really have, a strong faction mechanic. Because Camelot and Babylonia both have very strong faction mechanics in the story.
You feel like you can identify who the antagonists are throughout the entire story, as opposed to the other chapters where it feels like sometimes you're just wandering around not sure what's going on.
Exactly, yeah. And Camelot did a really good job of making it a moral and ethical conundrum that you are participating in. Because, the Holy Land, saving people. saving people by obliterating them so that they will be permanently preserved in that moment. Is that really saving people? No, not really.
It's like, technically, the early chapters do build into the overarching story, arguably more than Camelot and Babylonia do, but Camelot and Babylonia just have a significant jump in writing quality compared to the early ones. The early ones kind of all blend together, in my opinion.
It's unfortunate. I think if some of those early chapters had stronger writing, they probably wouldn't be as sort of bleh when it comes to considering the story and the parts you do and don't like, because Orleans has potential, you know? Orleans is another fun one that's got like some moral and ethical stuff, and you've got actually a pretty interesting cast of characters in Orleans.
Arguably, Orleans had another, like, in the early chapters pre-Camelot, Orleans arguably has the strongest faction mechanic, because you do have the strong central antagonist from the start with John Alter. You at least remember that from the adaptations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But, I don't know. I think... Yeah. I've got some pretty... I'm pretty set in my opinions as to which singularities I enjoyed more than others when it comes to writing. And I don't think the ones I enjoyed the most are any particular surprise. I think Septum not being something I hated is out of left field, but also, the other thing is, Septum is uniquely... It's the Roman Empire. It's, there's other stuff going for Septum, Yeah,
but it's the Roman Empire. They could have done so much
but
more. But
it's Boudica, and there's Romulus, and...
Boudica has no character when she's working with one of the people that was in power when she had that atrocity committed against her. Why is she working with Nero?
I'm just saying,
They had to write that out in an annoying pillar dialogue in Solomon. That is the only time that's really acknowledged in story.
Yeah, that was probably my least favorite part of the Solomon. So Solomon, right? Let's talk about Solomon. I went into Solomon, right? And was it the Septum one stretched on so long?
Okeanos was the one where you really started catching it. It was the Okeanos part, like when you had like Jason coming in, Blackbeard coming in. That's when.
Was that the really long one? Was it Okeanos? Yeah. Okay, so it was Okeanos then. It was that. I thought it was.
You read Septum, I read Okeanos, but after Okeanos, you were like, that one was terrible. Like, it had less payoff than the previous ones we read.
Okay. I'm starting to get confused on them in my head because I can barely remember, that's exactly where one ended and the next one began. The thing was, one or two in the first couple were really long, right? And then, the last three were, arguably super short comparatively, right? If anything, I actually wouldn't have been mad if you gave a little bit of extra time to, North America. Half the servants who were in North America, we didn't even get to talk to in their little flashback, So, it's this is a little disappointing. I wouldn't have minded if you'd given some more time to Babylonia or to Camelot, which were such large, long chapters, but those were the ones that got shorted out for, amount of characters appearing and, amount of lines in favor of stuff like Septum and Okeanos. And don't get me wrong, I love Okeanos, and to be honest, Okeanos has kind of, I think, one of the best endings, right? In just Drake's entire speech at the end of that chapter, which is very long but very good. And then the callbacks to that in Solomon, right? That was a really good callback, but did it deserve that much attention over Babylonia or Camelot?
So, I could probably answer why it feels like some chapters got short and others didn't.
Is it because they went with popularity?
No.
Oh.
It's because I'm pretty sure each of those pillars were written by that chapter's respective author, and they were just told, give fan service to all of your characters from that story. So some authors went a little insane, and other authors maybe were like, oh, just a quick little thing.
Okay.
And because let's be honest here, these pillars were completely and wholly unimportant.
Oh, yeah, no, it didn't matter at all.
It was fan service, and after you've read one or two of them, they really start to blend together.
But to be honest, because
they're formulaic as hell.
But in a series like this, I kind of appreciate the callbacks at this point. It's been so long since I played some of these chapters, or read them. It was nice to have some of the callbacks,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind. And then Solomon had me feeling all sorts of emotions. And I mean, the hallmark of any good story is actually being able to trigger emotions in your readers or the people experiencing your story. Like that's basically one of like the major hallmarks of a well-written story or well-developed characters. And like, right, Solomon did have me feeling like big feelings, right? Like, I was incredibly, like, upset about Romani, you know? Like, Fu had me actually crying. Like, I was sitting in this chair, and I was trying so hard not to just tears streaming down my face, sobbing.
You said during the stream itself, the only reason MASH didn't get you is because you knew she's going to continue on.
Yeah, like, if MASH had... Oh, especially after Drake's comeback and the stuff that, like, Drake talked about between Okeanos and Solomon. Like, that would have killed me if I hadn't already known, right? And that was a spoiler we couldn't avoid, per se.
No way.
I kudos to the writers for me technically being spoiled about Romani's death, but still not being spoiled, per se, about Romani enough for it to really matter in the end, like, emotionally. So, like, I think they did a great job of paying it off at the very end. It's just that, man, that you had me in the first half with the quality being tanked. It really shined more in the second half.
The game or in Solomon? Or both?
Both. Both.
I mean, but isn't that just kind of descriptive of FGO as a whole? Like the parts you like were the parts that had the overarching characters involved, and not so much the individual small stories.
Yeah.
Outside of a few one or two that were written surprisingly well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just maybe doesn't match depending on the match Solomon to actual FGO part 1.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about how I feel about it. Noodly baby.
I feel like that meme where, like, you know, the like, my sweet child, and then go away, you abomination.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think... No, I do know. I'm pleasantly happy with the ending of part 1. I still think it's an abhorrent way to read a story. Right? This would have been 10 times more enjoyable in an animated format with voice acting, right? This would have been so much more avoidable if I could... This would be so much more enjoyable if I could watch it. And not even, like, anime, watch it, but, like, it would be so much easier for me to tolerate sitting through the dialogue if it was being voice acted, even in Japanese. And for me just reading the subtitles silently. Because then it's then it's just very similar to, like, other stuff that I've experienced in my life. Having to read it out loud was abhorrent. That was foul. Continuing to having to read some of these chapters out loud for little shits is going to be foul.
Okay, let's be real here. The reason you're reading it out loud is not for their sake, because a lot of these people have experienced the story.
It's because I would be very tempted to click the skip dialogue button just to get through the chapter faster.
Not even just the skip dialogue button, because we'd come back to it for off the shelf eventually anyways.
Yeah.
It's more so that, like, midstream you're not just zoning out and, like, reading chat instead.
Exactly.
My suggestion to do this was entirely based off of my experience playing Wind Waker with you.
Yeah, because at a certain point I will just get distracted by chat if I'm just sitting there silently reading a story. And chat's there in the window. It's absolutely foul, but it's necessary to a certain extent. I certainly will look forward to the potential option upcoming through Remnants and future FGO parts to be allowed to just do the gameplay on stream and then read it separately in my own time. Because I know from experience with this sort of thing that being allowed to just read it in my own time, like tapping through the dialogue silently, is going to be much more tolerable when it comes to actually maintaining interest in a story and really sinking my teeth into it, you know? Yeah. Not to say I won't. I'll still read chapters for you. I mean, I'm saying that it's foul and it's abhorrent. It's not the worst thing in the world. And I enjoy being there with chat when I do it. Like, it would be much harder to do it without chat, to be honest. So.
So I know we're going to be taking a bit of a break before you get, like, from where we're at now, you're taking a bit of a break before you come back to streaming FGO, but there's probably a lot less of a break for people watching this.
Not necessarily. I'll be taking a break from streaming story chapters of FGO, but I know when this video comes out, and some of our commenters have probably already seen me stream FGO, but just like in the rank up quests and like advancement shit. Like, I want to play around in the menus a little bit because I've kind of kept myself entirely out of all of that stuff that's available in the back end of like the main page. And now I've kind of got some time where I don't feel guilty for doing that instead of progressing a story that I'm actively reading. And I haven't gotten into a new story chunk yet. That I'll be leaving off on.
And if you do want to read story, those interludes are much more bite-sized. You can definitely do one in a stream, or even 2 or 3 in a stream.
Yeah, so I'll probably be funking my way around FGO occasionally throughout the beginning of July, and probably, maybe a little bit into August once I get back, but we'll see.
But once you are back fully and you do jump back into the story, you have a lot of options as to what you could do next.
I think I'm perfectly content to play through these, like the Epic of Remnants bits, in order, right? I'm perfectly content to do that. I don't feel the need to jump around. I will, however, be double checking to see if any of them might be better done as off the shelves.
Well, I think in the end, I'd like to do off the shelves for even the ones you do read on stream. Just the ones that you would read on stream would just be solely the ones that chat's actually interested in seeing your story reactions for.
So ideally, that does mean that at some point in August, probably after you get back, because you're probably going to be the one handling the polls, you'll have polls up for stuff that probably in the Discord and on YouTube for what people actually want.
So that means
see.
You'll probably be starting with Shinjuku. I will point us the other direction, though, as well. There are the 2 main interludes to do as well in there, being Christmas in the Underworld and Seraph. I can give you the release order of that if you want, but those really they're really not supposed to be in any specific order for those ones. So
yeah,
it's really up to you where you want to put those.
Either way, that's like we will get back to playing through and reading FGO. It's just going to be a month or 2. Yeah. And you'll see me fucking around in the menus. Should be a new evocation shop drop in, what, a month or so? 2 months?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not keeping track of those too closely.
I am.
I have every single unit that goes into that shop at this point in NA.
Yeah, see, I'm planning. I've got a list. I know which ones I'm waiting for and which ones I'm not. So... do you have anything else you wanna?
This is already one of our longer off the shelves. I know.
True.
I have I have a full video retrospective on my thoughts on all of the chapters in this channel, so I'm pretty spoken out on FGO. Do you have any final thoughts? Since this is, for all intents and purposes, a discussion for your purposes.
I suppose I will leave off with the thought that, in my opinion, my favorite character in all of Part 1, as an actual character, right, who is present in the story, contributed in a meaningful way, and made me feel things, was Romani Archiman. Like, very firmly, it was Romani Archiman.
Fair enough. Romani Archiman the character over Ozymandias the character, but not Ozymandias the concept.
Yeah. That's, well, I mean, it's a bit, yeah, I mean, actually, in terms of servants, Ozzy would not have been my favorite in all of Part 1. It actually would have been Tez, I think. For just... what?
Tez?
Yeah. Sorry, Ketz.
I was gonna say.
Sorry. Oh my god. Ozzy, Odie, Ketz, and Tez. Fuck. Cuckoo, Ketz, Tez, Ozzy, and Odie will be the death of me. You all know exactly what I mean. I'm consistently saying the wrong name now. For all of them. It's so bad. Oh my god.
I'll see you guys in Shinjuku.
Like, comment, subscribe.